So hi guys, I guess we are live. Yeah, we're just gonna wait for about a few minutes. It's also the azan, and we're gonna wait for some of our audience to join in. Um, Meanwhile, welcome to the show. I'm really looking forward to adding a lot of values in terms of understanding the definition of NLP and certain myths and misconceptions that are revolving around it. So we're gonna talk about the what, the why, and the how also for it. So recently, I basically did a session. Usually, I don't do sessions at all. So I let my team members and my 300 graduates, to do a lot of sessions online. And I'm mostly, engaged in terms of studying, learning, and coaching others. And also, I work extensively with my graduates. So I devote my lot of time and attention to helping my graduates most of the times, rather than doing all live sessions there. Nevertheless, it also, sometimes my team also suggests that I should always be there for you guys. So here I am, and we're going to begin irrespectively. So first, let's understand what is NLP. So in the recent back, when we say, as per definition, like some people, ask variations of definition. So some people ask me, Arslan, can you explain NLP in one word? Can you tell me the metaphor of NLP? Can you tell me other, areas of NLP? Let's go bit by bit. First of all, let's first adhere to, one area and one understanding so that we understand it, that NLP is a technique. So that's what we're looking at. Now, while I have done almost about over and above, about 15 global certifications in different methodologies and everything, NLP is only the one that we're going to pay attention to right now. But in totality, NLP is a technique. Now, what is it a technique for? NLP is a technique for modeling. Modeling is something when you're basically, modeling and matching and mirroring, anybody's behaviors, values, belief systems, and any, of their core competencies, and you're able to replicate them for producing results. So that's what we're seeing in terms of modeling. How I basically related, because we're in Pakistani context and most of our clients, they come from the Muslim background. Easiest way to understanding modeling is that it's something that we've been doing for ages. It's like following the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When any Muslim, brother or sister follows the sunnah, they basically adhere to the modeling technique. They're modeling all the beautiful skill sets and things and teachings that the Prophet basically left behind for us. Now, similarly, there are certain attributes in terms of, like, for example, somebody wants to understand and become better at communication. They could use modeling technology. Somebody wants to become better in terms of increasing their sense of confidence. They would also use the modeling technology. So it's totally a technology. Now, when we're saying it's a technology, we're basically claiming it to be an art more over than science. Now, are there certain attributes that are scientific? Yes, they are. So we're looking at the mind, and we're looking at the mind in terms of what techniques can we use to stimulate the mind. As Bandler basically, reaches out, he says NLP is like an attitude, a methodology, something that leaves a trail of techniques. Again, the word technique has been used. Now, what is an attitude? Attitude, in terms of NLP, we basically do coaching with the reference of NLP. I love the attitude part, and the attitude is called curiosity. So I love therapists having the sense of curiosity. Any great interventionist or a therapist would advise you that you should be always curious. So when clients come to me, I'm always curious. Rather than looking at the why of the aspects, I'm always indulged into the how of the aspects. So when a client comes in and says, Arslan, I'm going through a lot of challenges in my life. I'm going through a lot of problems in my life. And the great NLP, inquisitive inside me, and curiosity that I have, I basically ask, well, how do you create the problem? So if I know how they're creating the problem, I can model somebody who's the best at it, and basically also learn, help the individuals and the clients to learn those strategies of basically overcoming their challenges or problems. So it's curiosity. Let's first understand it. It's a technique. It's to understand and anticipate curiosity, to understand the attitude, and basically asking the question, how does a client do it? How does one have depression? If you ever come across a client who has a sense of depression and they basically linguistically tell you, Arsan, I'm going through a depression, well, how are they creating that depression? So we are trying to understand how they're doing it by studying their behaviors and patterns. We're basically also going to give them the technology and techniques to come overcome it, and also to advance further beyond it. Now, we've talked about modeling itself, so we've talked about curiosity. Uh, and the other great thing that, this, basically follows through is the willingness to, basically experiment. Therapy and coaching overall, I would basically attribute coaching as an art. And if you find any great therapist, also, for example, even if you come across any great psychologist or a psychotherapist or even a coach or anybody else who does interventionists of the people who basically look after mental health, this will be amazing for them. They'll tell you that it's an art. And why is it an art? Because human mind is so vast that it cannot be put into a lab, just like you put a rat in the lab and you study it. Human mind is diverse. It goes into many, many directions and forth. Every human being is very, very unique in their own domains. They have their own set of perceptions. They have their own ways of defining realities. They have their own words also to structure any experience. It's been fascinating. So even when somebody tells me, son, but when people come as depressed clients, shouldn't they go to psychologists? Sure, they should go to psychologists. And but sometimes we want to ask also the clients at a very prerequisite level, what do they mean by depression? And one client basically came in and said, well, my depression means I am basically not able to fulfill all my tasks that are in my routine. So that's now the client's definition for depression. So it doesn't indicate anything in terms of chronic depression. It's just that they don't have any word to generate for it. So they label, and they label a lot of words like that. And we have a lot of sense of labels that we attribute to our daily routines. Other than sense of labeling, we also attribute ourselves to certain phenomena. Now, where is NLP useful? So if we understand that NLP is a technique and it's a modeling technique, it requires us to basically, it's an art. We're willing to basically experiment. We're trying to understand the language structures of an individual. So then we construct the definition. So NLP is three-letter words, so three alphabets, NLP. So we're talking about first condition, that's the neurology, the neuro, the mind, actually. So we want to structure and understand how the brain basically functions. Now, while we're understanding it, sure, there are a lot of scientific research models that are available, which we also utilize, and we try to understand how the brain functions. And we want to understand what are our neural connections. So in our networks, we basically take in certain inputs. Of course, our mind is a cognitive based computer, so it basically requires input. Now, what are those things that basically hit onto our neurology, and how do we basically decipher them from where? So first one, we have the visual. We can see. So whatever's, I'm seeing you guys right now on the screen. You're all logged in. You're all plugged in. While I'm seeing this, this is projecting certain information into my brain, so in my mind, and it creates a process. So there's a visual. Then second one is I can always taste things. So the taste is also a function that basically gives an input to the brain. And for this one, we basically would have olfactory, gustatory, sorry, for taste. So gustatory. And for the smell, and it's like sniffing, which is we smell stuff, and there's odors, and there's fragrance, anything that we can decipher that also gives an input to the brain. So then that's olfactory, sniffing, smelling, and then we have something which is also called hearing, listening. So that's our ears, so that's auditory, any auditory signals that are basically coming inside the brain. So we have visual, gustatory, olfactory, we've got auditory, and then we're looking also one more step ahead to the kinesthetic. So while I'm sitting here, I'm also feeling something. So what is the temperature like? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling nervous? Am I feeling confident? These are all the sense of feelings also, which are based on the inputs, which is called the kinesthetic. So that's the first one. So neuro is the input, the processing capability through our five senses. And these are the five senses that we're looking at. Then we have got the second one, which is called the linguistics. So when the client comes in, client, of course, now the client can see, the client can hear, the client can listen, the client can touch, feel, the client can sniff, smell, and client can also taste and everything. So client is neurologically functioning. So one thing that most people ask, what kind of clients can I take? Well, number one, we're performing neurologically. So if they can adhere to certain senses, and if they are able to be receptive, those are good clients to basically work on in terms of coaching perspective. So that's the first adherence. Now the second adherence is, now what do? I do understand that I have these five senses. How do I interpretate them? Now that's where the second phase comes in. So neuro, N, and then L, which is called the linguistics. Now linguistics is also really important. Everything is the meaning that we give to our set of communication, the meaning that we attribute to the words, the meaning that we attribute to certain experiences. Communication is everything. Linguistics are what basically how we wire our neural networks in our brain also. So it's amazing. So when clients will come to you with their problems, they're linguistically going to shape them and tell you. So they're going to tell you, I have a problem, for example, I'm going through. Let's take one example. So, for example, somebody comes to you, I recently went through a divorce. Now, when they say that, they say it in linguistic. Now, we want to understand what do they really mean by the statement. I've recently gone through, divorce. So we want to understand the more linguistic part of it. We want to understand what exactly is entitled when they're saying, I have recently. How much is recent? I don't know. So we want to linguistically, be able to measure that. Somebody says, I've been through a divorce. What do you really mean by divorce? What is divorce in your context? So, for example, in Pakistan, it could be, basically verbally saying, the word divorce, and then it happens for certain people. And in other countries, it's like by legally proceeding something, and then that's basically divorce. But what do they really mean? What is divorce really entitled for a client? What do they understand from it? Is it causing something? Is it attributing to certain thing? So that's the linguistics. So of course I see, but see what linguistics. So we want to understand the meaning of the communication that is happening. So neuro, linguistic, and after linguistic, we want to basically also go to the third aspect, which is called the programming. Now that's where the modeling technology comes in. Now every computer, like for example, has an input, has an output, and then processing, area. So the programming is how you can basically look at person's internal representation, how they're basically managing the communication in their neural networks, understanding them, and basically also guiding them to basically create better ones, creating strategies, creating beliefs, creating values, creating an attitude that basically serves them to go towards empowerment. So we're basically programming our brain to basically attune to professionalism, or attune to excellence, or attune towards success. So that's in definition what NLP is. Now, why basically we want to be, when we say that when we're working with our clients, even as coaches, every client is extremely unique. So we want to basically study, and we want to basically understand how the brain basically functions, or how the mind really, works in terms of when a person is claiming to basically have a challenge or a problem area. So let's look at the cascade. I'm only going to share with you a cascade. So this is what we, advocate to our students where NLP can really, really be helpful for. So all of you who are watching, and you might be wanting to know, how could NLP basically help you guys? Or if you're my graduate and if you're graduated from us, most people ask you, where can NLP be utilized? NLP can be utilized. So what would those areas be like? Well, they're the four clouds, and we're going to go through one by one, everyone. And I think there's a few things that are over and above the four clouds also, but this is where NLP really becomes useful. Number one, every individual, every individual goes through a process, and that's called negative thinking. Now, there are some people who basically do go through a set of negative thinking. They have certain negative thoughts that are coming to their mind. And somehow, when there's a lot of construction of those negative thoughts or negative thinking, they basically, project and construct a behavior that is very different. So, is there anybody who basically thinks like that? And of course, most of us do. So, and in different age groups, there are different type of negative thinkings. So sometimes, when I go back to my good old, school days, when I couldn't basically resonate with the learning that was happening in the classroom, and because I just come back from US and I was in Pakistan, and it was all Urdu, and I couldn't understand everything. So I got fed up. In my internal representation, I said, studying is really bad. And so I created a negative thinking for myself. And when that happened and that pursued for a certain period of time, then my prayers would also be associated. Ya kash agar aaj hartal ho jaye, kuch ho jaye, main school nahi jana pade, things like that. So they construct a format of negative thinking. So even when we're working with kids and children, we want to understand what are the meanings that they're attributing, and maybe there's something lacking in the sense of the meaning and the interpretations that they're creating in their internal representation that we could work on. So we want to convert all the negative thinking towards positive thinking. Now, raise your hands if you honestly know. Maybe you might not be doing negative thinking, but you do come across certain individuals in your lifespan, in your friend zone, in your circle, who might be going through certain negative thinking, and that's where NLP could become very useful. So if you know the tools and techniques of NLP, that technique is going to help them to come from negative thinking all the way towards positive thinking. We want to construct, their brains to function and their minds to basically focus on positive attributes, positive thinking, rather than the negative ones. So that's the first attribute. That's where NLP is really, really useful at. Number two, what we can look at is the negative emotions. Now, we're not talking about emotions in general. Emotions are great. If you have emotions, good or bad, they're there to serve you. There is no such thing as good emotion or a bad emotion. But yes, when an emotion or a bad emotion or a negative emotion affects you and takes you towards disempowerment, then we're constructing that as to be a negative emotion. For example, we could take this as an sense. So for example, let's talk about fear. Now, fear is an emotion, so it's a gift. We've been gifted by that. Is it also useful? Yes, it is. So if I take somebody to the third story, and I tell them, oh, hey, you got to jump from the third story, so their fear should kick in. It serves them over there. No, buddy, this is this is dreadful. This is dangerous, and I shouldn't be doing that. So fear isn't bad. Anger isn't bad. Sadness isn't bad. But if it's not processed, if it's providing negative results, and if it's basically getting you towards not closer to your goal and it's disempowering you, then we want to basically really work on it. So we want to take all the negative emotions and construct positive learnings for our clients. So we don't convert them into positive emotions. You see, they are already emotions. We understand that emotions are not neither good or neither bad, but we're constructing positive learnings. The moment you construct positive learnings through using NLP tools and techniques, you basically allow the client to experience the emotion at a holistic level. So their intelligence goes up and their emotion goes down. Now, where they're basically in the capacity to think and take decisions for themselves and rationally work towards their productivity. So that's what we're looking at. So first one was negative thinking, converting that into positive thinking, then negative emotions, only negative emotions, and converting them towards constructing positive learnings. Now, there are tools and techniques which we'll talk about them a little later onwards. What are the other areas where NLP can really be useful? NLP coaching can be really, really useful in terms of inner conflict. Now, all of us at certain given point, just like we talked about the emotion, we all do feel sad. We all do have anger issues. We do have certain fears. We do have certain guilts. We have certain, sets of betrayals when somebody betrays us, and these emotions do make us sometimes haywire. Similarly, there are a lot of conflicts that also basically happen for us. Now, a conflict, inner conflict, is something that basically divides us into two parameters, and we really don't know what to basically do. Inner conflicts are something like, for example, should I basically take a break from my career and rest? Now, if I take break and if I rest, then I'm not able to earn money. So should I earn money or should I take rest? Now, when the mind is not able to decide and decipher between the two things, it doesn't do both of them. And this is like let's screw everything and let's just sit. Let's just I want to think more about what do I want to do with my life. So that basically disempowers and disengages an individual. So other areas of basically inner conflicts can be, should I settle abroad or should I live in Pakistan? Now, maybe for some client, it would be like, staying in Pakistan would be very important. For example, to say that my family is here, my mom is there, my dad is there. But there's another part of me that basically says I should also be, settling abroad because, I have higher job prospects or so that's the meaning that the client is attributing. We're not attributing it for the client, but then he's seeing inner conflict within. A funnier side would be, when people are, deciding to get married and they're like, should I get married over here or should I get married over here? So that could also be an inner conflict. So we want to basically, and the conflicts, originally are a result of basically not, let's put it this way, it's somewhat there because they're not in alignment with our values. That's how we want to basically see it. So for getting rid of inner conflicts, we work on tools and techniques for values realignment. So that's the tool and technique. So we want to get rid of the inner conflict and create values realignment for the individual. We want the parts to basically integrate to one full wholeness. We want the client to feel the sense of wholeness, completeness, inner peace. So that's the other area where NLP can become extremely useful for. So now let's go a little bit step further. So we talked about negative thinking and converting into positive thinking. We saw about emotions, and we want to get the negative emotions to convert into positive learnings. We saw inner conflict, and we want that to convert to values realignment. And now we're looking at limiting beliefs. So there are certain people who go through major amount of limiting beliefs. Limiting belief is something basically that we basically attribute in terms of our own linguistic patterns, and in our own mind we create a belief system which disempowers us, which disengages us. Limiting beliefs are like, for example, um, I am not confident enough. For example, if some individual constantly attributes themselves, नहीं मेरे अंदर confidence नहीं है, is a limiting belief. Some people, basically, this was a very interesting one. I had an individual who basically went through the MBTI testing mechanism and said, Arslan, do you know why I'm not confident? Because I'm an introvert. So introversion, becoming the sense of lack of confidence, and then they create that limiting belief for themselves. Oh, I'm an extrovert. That's why I can't sit at one place and do work. Again, limiting beliefs. We don't. Personality testings are just an image shot of your sequence of thinking in that particular moment. They don't define who you are as a person. Please never take them. If somebody comes up to, if some test tells you that you're an introvert, it's just your thinking level at that particular time. It's impossible to be 100% introvert. At any given time, you do go out and engage with other people. So we want to help our clients that they, basically can go and, become a better version for themselves. If somebody is introvert and they're happy with it, we're great. If it's serving them really well, they should be at that state. And in certain situations, maybe introversion is not supporting them, and they want to create a dominant, new empowering belief to basically help them to, gain more set of success for their life. That's where an NLP interventionist can help in and chip in. So limiting beliefs. मैं कमा नहीं सकता, अभी मेरी उम्र ही क्या है. These are all the sequence of limiting beliefs. So we want to create, from limiting belief, we want to generate a new empowering belief. So that's the fourth area where, NLP becomes extremely useful. And what are the other few areas other than these four quadrants? Well, of course, there could be areas where the client might come up and they might say, I have a negative behavior. Now, client never really says that they have a negative behavior, but they try to understand from their perspective and their model of the world that they are engaging in a behavior that is not producing results for them. For example, we had a, mom who said, Arslan, I want to be a great mom, but sometimes, what, these emotions really kick in, and then I start shouting on my, children. Now, she's not saying I'm doing negative behavior, but she realizes the aspect that she's engaged in a behavior that is disempowering. So it can become really important for, people to create new positive behaviors and generate better positive behaviors, or behaviors that they would want to have instead of that negative behavior. And it's also useful for habits. Habits are a repetition of things that we have basically performed over and over and over again. So in our mind, what happens in the neural networks, we have constructed them. So let's say, for an example, when you're learning driving at a very, very initial state, you might not be a very expert driver at that time, but by practicing it every single day for an hour or two, and then you taking the car in test drives, and learning documents, and then learning about how to basically drive, that time you basically create an expertise. You create a neural network which operates on automation, and now you're a confident driver. So while you're driving, you really don't have to see the gear while shifting. You don't have to really look at where the handbrake is. You don't have to really, it happens on autopilot. So your brain basically, it tunes to it. So you've created a neural network for it. And similarly, the habits, that we have, the bad habits that we have, they're also done because we've repeated them a lot of times. It's as simple as that. And we want to basically then install new empowering habits which allow the clients to feel that sense of, achievement that they would want to basically achieve for themselves. So we want to basically see their patterns, their behaviors, and we want to basically see how we could, basically we can navigate the client to constructing much more better habits which are empowering, much more, empowering behaviors as well. So this is a huge list, and overall, let's try to put this. We want the clients to be able to take decisions. So what happens is that when most of these graduates, when they graduate, because in NLP we're structured towards working around on very sensitive life life based coaching, so they don't understand the context of applying that into corporate settings. Now in corporate settings, where all do I use NLP? So NLP is extremely useful. Like for example, in areas like accepting change. Now that's a behavior. So I can use NLP coaching for accepting change, for adaptability issues, for anger management, uh, for career development, for change of position, for example, commitment issues. Now here, I'm not using any word of therapy. These are all the areas which are really amazing where we could basically help the clients to create empowering beliefs. For example, communicating emotions only. We could work on that area. Communication issues, like for example, the company or business or in personal positioning of your own self. Areas like, for example, conflicts and conflict resolution, how to achieve conflict resolution within the organization, understanding the cultural differences, decision making, emotional intelligence, the sense of anybody who's having a sense of feeling left out or left behind. Interestingly, we also use it for gender communication. Uh, it's really a privilege that we have certain graduates who have helped have taught us a lot, and I think NLP coaching is also really important in terms of while we were basically working with certain corporate clients and how basically they can communicate gender communication within their organization by accepting and acknowledging LGTB individuals in the office. Job selection, language precision, leadership competencies, areas like, for example, performance enhancement, personal organization, presentation skills, social skills, self-esteem, stage fright, negative emotions, managing uh, oh test anxieties, product launch anxieties, time management, any set of work-life balance. So these are all the beautiful areas where we could all work on what NLP really is, and that's the coaching mechanism. So with my last uh, of course my host was really professional. He was only communicating with me the questions that were basically being asked by the audience, and since I had very limited time to basically answer all of them, I want to take you through this. So let's see it. Now most people basically say is NLP, so what they, so this is also a fashion, by the way, and you will come across a lot of individuals. So we have become, enslaved to Google.com, and I don't mind Google. Google is a really productive technique, but you have to understand how to use it to your, optimum, utility. So when I use Google, I Google for areas like this. So I would Google what are the, positive aspects of basically going and visiting a psychologist. What is the positive side of basically going through NLP? What are the benefits of NLP? What are the benefits of basically visiting a psychiatrist? So I attribute and select those key areas for Google, and I see the desired results. And then I can always go and have my choices and options. Whereas now, if I use Google to a different extent, it will give me also the same results. If I ask Google how psychology is damaging, it'll give you 10 results. How psychiatrists are unethical, it'll give you 25 results. If you see how NLP is not a science, you will get about maybe more 50 results. So there's a huge dogma or a myth that is basically concepted. So when people graduate as NLP, they're asked यार ये NLP जो है ना ये NLP pseudoscience है. And that I was bombarded with those questions. NLP is pseudoscience. Well, NLP, I already stated that NLP is a set of sequence techniques. So first of all, for something to become a pseudoscience, it first has to be a science. So we're looking at NLP as an art. It's a technique. It's a methodology. It's something like, for example, mixed martial arts. If you've ever heard about mixed martial arts, it's a technology. Yoga is a technology because yoga is a system of techniques. NLP similarly is a system of techniques. Jiu-jitsu is a system of techniques. So, I personally didn't. I've done lot of certifications on various different areas, but I'm a raving fan of NLP, and I'm raving fan of NLP even because I studied NLP to understand the art. I didn't get into NLP to study the science of NLP. you know I got into NLP in terms of understanding the techniques and how do they apply it to the mind sciences and what are the applications. So most people ask Arslan, what is the credibility of NLP? The credibility of NLP is basically goes way back. It goes back to 1933 in the journal Semantics, the book that was basically produced, and that was the basic foundation that was laid forward for it. But what are the things that we adapted? So if there was some scientific study, we took that scientific study and we incorporated it into the NLP. So that's why, some people, you'll see some trainers saying it's part science and mostly art. It's not a science as a holistic, but there have been really active contributors to this, industry. People like, for example, Fritz Perls. Fritz Perls was modeled by Richard Bandler and John Grinder. This guy was the father of Gestalt therapy. So again, a very person who basically contributed a lot in the study of field of Gestalt. Um, Virginia Satir was the world's leading, and I'm not only saying just leading, Virginia Satir was the world's leading family therapist. Now, she was having amazing results, and John Grinder and, basically Bandler modeled her and created the technique, basically the meta model, which is which leads the foundation of coaching, how to ask questions and create breakthroughs for your clients. So that's a fabulous one. Then they modeled also basically Milton Erickson. Now, Dr. Milton Erickson was an authority, a world leading psychotherapist and also hypnotherapist. So this guy basically gave the birth to the hypnotherapy and made a major contribution in the field of hypnotherapy. And from modeling him, they learned the Milton model. And all Fritz, Virginia, or Milton in their biography really appreciated the modeling technology of NLP, and they wrote in favor of it. So it does have a very strong, solid foundation. Uh, Again, many other contributors, very similar ones that you might have also heard. Twitmeyer, for example, the person, if you've ever heard the stories of somebody who used to hammer the knee and the knee would bounce up. So yeah, anchoring. If you understand, basically anchoring, and not only anchoring, but the semantics of conditions and stimuli and response, SR response. These were also laid down by Twitmeyer and Pavlov. So these are two very big contributors. We basically studied them as well. And my personal favorite, Dr. Adriana James and Dr. Ted James. So amazing guys, and they Dr. Ted James also holds the credentials of basically being the founder of the Timeline Therapy Association. So he has done he spent his lifetime, 3 decades researching. So it's a it is a well researched set of techniques and tools, and they are available. If you would want to should you want to contact the American Board of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, they are available with Ted James and Adriana James. And that's what we basically present in our manuals as well, with the references, with the authentications, and with the same other contributors, Robert Dills, many other. So I wouldn't say into that. So again, is psychology a science? Yes, sure. It has scientific techniques, and uh, some of them are still also art. So there are certain areas in psychology as well which do serve as pseudoscience. But NLP itself is just a technology, right? We want to understand it in that context. It's a technology for modeling to basically create excellence. So and it did adapt a lot of work from therapy itself. But what you would really want to do in general in the environment, I think it's a wrong debate. I have basically seen left and right people fighting around areas. Is psychology better? Is NLP better? Is psychiatry better? What's better? So the question is not of what is better. The question is, what do they really address? Now, if I told you all the areas and problems that NLP addresses. If that comes into the domain, NLP practitioners can take lead into those. Now, for example, if the client basically has certain disorders, certain areas where basically there's a disorder that is diagnosed, then of course the NLP practitioner is not capable of taking that on board, and they should be referred to the relevant authority. Now, psychologists who are clinical practitioners and people who are psychiatrists are well enough equipped to look after mental disorders or to work even more extensively towards mental health. Can NLP work in mental health area domain? Sure, it can. But extensive, work where there is a disorder, prescribed, where the client is not receptive, that's where their role comes in, and they play a very, very important role in our society. Why would we want to compare that? Comparisons should be made. If you were to compare an NLP practitioner with an NLP practitioner, I'm more than happy to basically assess and study. But you cannot compare NLP with any other domain. They're very different. So it depends on the type of a problem. For example, if there's an internal bleeding in the brain, for example, for any matter, for example, there's a head injury and there's internal bleeding. Now you'll neither go to an NLP practitioner, neither you'll go to a psychologist, neither you'll go to a psychiatrist, but you'll go to a neurosurgeon, a person who's whose expertise are in neuroscience. Again, where is neurologist? So where is the problem really lying or attributing at? We really want to look into which domain serves better. But NLP practitioner, for any individual who's lacking in certain significant amount of behaviors, is receptive and does not have a disorder, works really, really well. Can they collaborate together? I think it's a beautiful thing to collaborate together. I have all my respect for the field of psychology. I have all my respect for the field of psychiatry. I have all my respect for the people who are neurologists. So can we collaborate and work together? Sure, we can. And number of people do, by the way. Like I mentioned, that even so, if you want to look this up in the curriculum of Stanford University, if I'm not right, I think I have that also described with me. Yes, it is Stanford University. So I was basically looking at other scientific areas and universities and institutions who are teaching psychology, and in their structure, they have basically made NLP as a compulsory subject. So as part of the learning, more called complementary based therapy or alternative therapy. So NLP is there, and that's been there. So there's CBT, for example. There's EMDR, and CBT and EMDR are both derivatives of NLP, by the way. So NLP basically precedes this. So they both have also very, very scientific, and they're experted by various amount of psychologists, and again, so they do it. Now, but then again, does it work for everybody? That's a subjective question. So NLP is also, the understanding of subjective matters. So nothing, in true sense, if you say, is one thing a solution for everything? No, it's not. So sometimes what happens is that, yeah, sure, somebody could be going through stress, and it was, and was not also something that was major stress. It did not, so some NLP techniques for that particular individual did not work. And it's okay. For that client, maybe CBT worked. And for certain clients, CBT doesn't work for a basic stress situation. And then basically they might go for EMDR. And maybe that doesn't work for them. Maybe they went to a dialectical behavioral therapist. Maybe they went to a psychologist. Maybe they just even visited a psychiatrist. Again, different areas and different areas, of course, will have different results. But any one thing cannot be substantial for every single thing. Collaborative efforts, I love it. So we have been blessed, we have been honored. In our organization, we had a lovely individual. She's an intersex educator, and she did NLP. She's having amazing results. So testimonials are available on our groups. You can connect with our graduates, and they can tell you a lot about it. So she's doing phenomenal work with transgenders. She's also using NLP coaching. She's a raving fan, and she's the institution for experimentation and research for us. So a number of cases that she takes, we basically file and database our own learnings from it as well, and we also compile it and we send it to Ted James and AB NLP so that he can also review our work. I've had the honor of lot of psychotherapists who have basically done NLP in conjunction, and they're having a beautiful result. So they're using their psychotherapy as well, and also they're intermingling NLP techniques in it, and it makes a very good flavor out of the two. Then there are a lot of psychologists that basically come to our NLP practitioners, and we have lot of psychologists, some who have just studied psychology to the MS level, and some people who are clinical practitioners of psychology. Both have done NLP, and they are raving fans of it, and they also give and recommend about NLP. We had also psychiatrists, by the way. So it was an honor. And they were sitting there. They were not sitting with the intention of challenging me that they know more about the mind, because that wasn't the debate. The idea was that they're the experts at whatever they do, and we respect their model of the world. We only gave them more tools and techniques. Hey, why don't you go and try this with the client? And why don't you go and try this with the client? And they had success amount, significant amount of, success. They got back, some of our, graduates got back to us, while they were working with certain disorders, how NLP helped them to manage it a little bit better. How does NLP work for disorders? We don't talk about that. But again, for psychiatrists, using it with their sense of knowledge and responsibility that they have, sure, they can use it. They're licensed to do so. So that's what what I really, really love. NLP is, it's just not about techniques. It's about creating behavioral flexibility. So that's what I enjoy the most. So we can have a psychiatrist, psychologist, and an NLP person working together, to achieve behavioral flexibility, and that's what we require for our clients. And that's what I truly enjoy. So some of the questions that were asked to me, but like, NLP practitioner करने के फौरन बाद आप किसी हॉस्पिटल में तो जाके जॉब नहीं कर सकते, आप अपनी क्लिनिकल प्रैक्टिस तो नहीं शुरू कर सकते ना. Well, no, and yes, also to a certain extent, there are a lot of NLP graduates who have their coaching clinics in within their hospital domains. So they've established them, and they've written on top of it that we're just coaches, and our intention is to basically help people to elevate their empowerment areas. Sure, they do work. Uh, so for example, not everybody in the hospital is an MBBS doctor. There could be somebody in the administration function who has learned NLP and has done it. So let me tell you about some graduates. So this is really, really interesting. So our clients are people who are, working in General Electric, who are basically from GSK, who are from Novartis, who are from, Bayer, who are working in, basically Sanofi Aventis. We have a thousand, the list can continue on of, I mean, how many NLP graduates are there? NLP is an advancement tools and techniques that help the person to basically bring in more tools to the table. So their effectivity, their productivity, and their chances of success increase on the table when you have more set of tools and kits. The few other questions that individuals basically ask, and that's a fun, that's also a really hilarious one, is sort of expensive about the pricing mechanism. Yeah, I will basically come back to that question. So here's one more of it. So this is one question that keeps getting asked again and again. What is the meaning of the certification? What is the value of certification? And that's a does certification is a certification more than enough to credit that you're basically the best in the world? Well, no. Like I said, NLP is like a technique and a system of techniques, just like in mixed martial arts. So let's say for karate, in karate you have white belt, blue belt, black belt. You have belt systems, and if you are any belt, like let's say even if you are a black belt, that does not certify you that you're going to be amazing on street fight. It just means that you know your defense mechanisms, and you have met the basic criteria. You completed the basic requirements and tasks under a supervisor. Similarly is the certification. So when we enable our graduates, we ensure that the standards are met. Now, what are the standard evaluations? That's a huge SOP. That's we're looking at them on 14 presuppositions. We're judging them on, we're not judging, but we're basically categorizing. Are they at cause or are they at effect? And there are a number of other tools and techniques to basically evaluate if the person is ready to take on interventions outside. And whatever they do outside is based on basically their capabilities. So how do you really know which NLP graduate to basically go to? For this, we're establishing our website so that we can post the names of all our graduates who have really completed all the SOPs and requirements, and you can also attend to them. For trainers, you can always go to the parent websites and you can always find out which trainers are there. To our credibility, Alhamdulillah, ALN Co has also produced, we supported and facilitated 2 of our graduates to become NLP trainers and work in comparison, in line and in sync with us. So there's one trainer now in Islamabad, mashallah. There's one trainer, she's working in Hyderabad, and she does also batches in Karachi. So we're growing the industry in terms of basically looking at NLP as an amazing transformational coaching process to basically help other clients and also to establish their business as coaches, and become professional coaches in their world. So that's how it is. Yeah. So uh, again, so Dr. Matt, Dr. Ted, Dr. Adriana, these are all the people that can come to you. So now I'll be basically, attuning to all the questions and, comments that you guys have so that I can give you, more concrete answers. So we had one question from Gia. Why is it so expensive? Yeah. So Gia, NLP practitioner and, the technique of NLP is expensive, but compared to what? So, what I really like asking question is compared to what? So if I was to learn English language and I went to a premium, English language learning center in Pakistan, and I got the pricing out, by the way. So for their 7 module components, the pricing structure goes over and above 500,000 rupees. And it's spread over, like good 3 years. So there's, different areas in it. So there are different levels in it. And some of them, do have. So compared to what? Compared to a complete, basically you know different programs, different certifications that are available in the market. NLP is priced at the price basically which allows us to manage the certification cost, which allows us to manage the venue cost, that allows us to manage the standard, the quality at which we're teaching. So we want to basically price it at the right amount so that basically every individual who enrolls gets the best and the best quality that they basically can anticipate. So NLP practitioner and master practitioner prices comparing to the entire globe in Pakistan, it is one of the lowest. We have kept that benchmark really, really at a, par so that people basically can invest and then they can create performance and empowerment for themselves very rapidly. And we've kept it also optional. So most of my clients that graduate, I always encourage them take 10 clients voluntarily. So they also attribute to the cause. But when we say voluntarily, make sure that the client is ready and they're accepting it, the shift that they want to create, and they're also involved, right? So they do basically contribute so they can go and help other people. And we have basically also have had a lot of sponsorship areas for people who have been visually impaired, for people who are transgenders, people who are from very low income group and really wanted to basically work for themselves. So we have that support group in the Pakistan. Considering that factor, we're the lowest in the world. On an average, the NLP practitioner course can go up to approximately 1,000 US dollars alone, standalone. So yeah, in terms of Pakistan, considering the travel and the accommodation in Pakistan, we have made that. But I have to basically ensure for myself that I basically am, there to basically do all the upgradations, all the, extra work and all the other, credentials so that I can serve you all in the best possible manner. And we've had really good, testimonials. So I would really like you guys to go and visit the testimonials that are there on our pages, our graduates, their credentials, and how they're using NLP. I think it's very, very useful. We're going to create also many streams in that context. So 48 minutes down the line, and I think I have clarified certain areas of NLP. How do we basically know? So there's also one more question that was asked. How do you know if it's a disorder? How do you know if somebody's going through a very major issue? It's very simple. The client will not be receptive. So we have ways to basically check the receptiveness of the client, and we're also there to basically see if it's falling into the ecology of us taking that client, of us agreeing to that coaching agreement. Worldwide, if you ask me, the coaching basically standards, we basically comply with all of them. So I can basically read them to you, from the article that we have. Our stand. So yeah, here we go. So coaching basically in deficit, since I've done ICF based coaching and I've also done NLP based coaching. Coaching has virtually no history. It has individuals, and but because they were not practicing the standardized method, the results were not consistent. And what the people in the coaching fraternity did is that they created standards so that they could benchmark. Now, but nevertheless, NLP as a history has solid history of results going back all the way up to 1975, when coaching wasn't even mentioned by most of the people. It has proven and is used successfully with verified businessmen, performers, athletes, politicians, the military, and the Marines, special services, financial tycoons, Every successful coach in the world uses it. The biggest, advocate, that we have, basically a raving fan who basically also does advocate NLP, is Tony Robbins. And you can see the range of the clientele that Tony Robbins looks into. Of course, he's working on a very different tangent altogether. So Tony Robbins has also been very amazing, a contributor. uh, Deepak Chopra has been a very amazing contributor. Some of the best, world-known, personalities are people who use NLP tools and techniques to basically increase their sense and association power of persuasion, rapport, creating that energy, and creating the power and the magic in their basically, communication, and being able to influence people not only consciously but unconsciously as well. Helping the clients to create that, set of aspiration that they want to always create for themselves. So these are all the areas of coaching that we basically see. In the corporate sector, we have three areas. So if I'm always looking at using NLP in the corporate sector, I'm using it for three areas. Number one, I'm using NLP coaching for underperformance. So it's a great way to basically help the clients to come out of their sense of underperformance. Number two, I'm also using it for increased and enhanced performance. So if somebody wants to basically gear up for that, we want to basically do it in that format as well. We also use NLP coaching in the corporate sector for improving clients and individuals' future performance as well. So these are all the performance areas where coaching is used. Then there are specializations. For example, there are areas where we can specialize in. For example, relationship-based coaching that requires master practitioner. Relationship is a sensitive area, so especially between husband and wife. That's an area where we want to be very, very careful, and we have slightly more basically what do you call standards for it. So we want to be very mindful of adhering to those. But again, then executive coaching, business coaching, business owner based coaching, coaching the managers. They're all domains where you can basically go into. By far, NLP coaching meets all the relevant standards. So remember that every NLP training that you will attend as an NLP coach, uh, you're going to deliver, or you will meet and exceed all coaching standards in the world. And I can vouch for that because I've done coaching from three different very great, remarkable global institutions, and by far NLP meets or at times even exceeds the coaching standards around the world. So I hope that was really, really useful. And some people also ask us, Arslan, what is the content? What is the set of content that we're going to be looking at when we join NLP? So the content of NLP, there are a lot of areas that we're going to look into. We want to basically look into the meta model question sequence, that is basically taking a problem and looking inside, deciphering more meaning inside that problem or that challenge area. We're going to look at Milton model, which is again Milton Erickson, which is the hypnotic language pattern. We want to look at the subjective areas, so everything that is outside the box. Also, we want to see what is the problem not. So outside the box, what would be outside the box? Let's talk about a small example over here. So it's amazing. Somebody came up to me and said, Arslan, I am depressed. Now, inside the box, we could have asked them certain slight questions, and these slight questions could be like, for example, well, okay, what do you mean by depression? So that's going inside, internal, and that's using a lot of meta model. Milton model would be, so you can also ask them questions which are outside the box. So, for example, well, working out or exercising, is that depressing? Then the client goes like, I'm not, that's not depressing. So okay, fine. So exercising is not depressing. What else is not depressing? Well, being around the kids is not depressing. Well, what else is not? Driving success in your career is not depressing. So we're now looking at areas other than outside the box. So we're going to talk about a lot of cool Milton patterns, the meta model. We're going to talk about anchoring. We're going to talk about submodality work. Submodality work is really, really amazing. We're going to see about. We're going to talk about reframing. We're going to see using your brain for change. We're going to look at timeline therapy, and we're going to look into coaching standards and various other models. So our certification is a unique certification. We have three endorsed, curriculums embedded into this one program. So not only are we teaching NLP certification as a practitioner, we're also doing the NLP coaching certification, and we're also teaching the timeline therapy techniques as a separate, domain. So anybody who graduates has got three different areas to their utility and their, use, which gives you more power and more empowerment. Why we have not, included the hypnotherapy in this, although I am an instructor for that as well. Now, for hypnotherapy, I feel that, clients require uh, fair understanding and command. So I basically, treat that as a very different subject area. But nevertheless, we do, incorporate. So of course, NLP again in hypnotherapy, one fourth and one third of the entire hypnotherapy is again NLP. So that's the foundation for hypnotherapy, by the way. So NLP, we do discuss about hypnosis to a certain basic level. We talk about regression techniques. We talk about, um, timeline-based therapy. Timeline is again a regression-based technique. So we're talking about gestalts and how to basically look at them, and a lot of other work that we basically cover in the 6 days. But again, this is a field for you guys to explore. Talk to our graduates, talk to our team members. So you might see the, ticker running in for details if you would want to get in touch. We would like you to connect with our graduates. Our graduates are our ambassadors. So that's how it is. And some outstanding graduates are the ones who basically keep coming, keep revising, keep recapping. And once you come into our NLP practitioner program, you are there with us for a lifetime journey. We don't let go of you. We're not like a training company that would train you on NLP techniques and say, okay, fine, you have learned it. Now you can go back, and then now it's not our domain. So now you can consistently come back, revise, recap, every time you come back. We always believe on the area of giving clients feedback. There was also a really good, interesting question. What is timeline therapy? Timeline therapy is a set of techniques which basically were the founder basically for this is Dr. Ted James. Dr. Ted James was the second master trainer graduate from Richard Bandler. So he basically made a lot of advancements. It's a beautiful regression based technique to help clients let go of negative emotions very, very, it has rapid results, very fast, and in most ecological, clean ways. So that's what timeline therapy is. It's also to do with regression. So we basically look into forensic regression. We look into, yeah, regression itself. So it's an amazing tool for negative, helping clients to create positive learning from the negative emotions that we talked about earlier in the video. That's what timeline therapy is, right? Uh, Maria Iqbal said, I heard it, it's up to 3,000 US dollars. Yes, it's true. Depends on what regions you're basically doing this in. Now, why the prices are a little bit inconsistent is because of the regions that you belong to. So for example, let's say if some in Middle East, the venue cost somehow seems to be a little bit more expensive. So there, could be more charges. In Europe, it's a little bit different. In the US, it'll be a little bit different. In Pakistan, we're blessed. So here we can basically subsidize the cost, based on our venue and other expenses. So it's only just the certification that we're basically charging up. You can connect with my team, and they'll be, really, really more than honored to help you. And one last thing, I think before I go, I think there was one question that Irfan had asked me. He said, Irfan, how do you know what kind of a graduate is coming to you? How do you check and monitor your inflow? uh, we check and monitor our inflow through a lot of tools and techniques that we are provided with, and they're the standard guidelines. So we always check for guidelines, but we don't deprive anybody of a learning opportunity. Trust me, we will never ever deprive anybody of learning opportunity. The only consent that I basically take from my clients is that they behave in the most ecological format. Number one. Number two, they respect other people's model of the world. They follow all our presuppositions and guidelines that we've given to them. Um, our clients speak basic English. Other than that, the graduates have done remarkable job. You would be surprised. I have a class fellow, basically. So she was my evaluator, by the way. She was also not directly evaluating me, but evaluating my group members. She's a certified trainer, and she was only 14, I believe 14 or 15 at the time she became trainer for NLP. She's one of the most successful trainers in Myanmar right now, teaching NLP tools and techniques. This was a case study. I mean, there are case studies like that where people take their passion and profession to a whole different level. There are NLP trainers who are basically, again, of mid-sized age and everybody else in different domains. but we don't deprive anybody of the opportunity. Let me just put it this way. So if there's a person, if it's a 12-year-old, youngster who wants to learn NLP, my son has done it. My son is about, he's now going to turn 12 years old, and he basically, he's a raving fan of NLP. He sometimes corrects me, or son, Dad, you're doing this pattern. This pattern is not this, and why don't you do this, and why don't you think about that? So I never would deprive anybody of that opportunity. If somebody's 80, we want to work on the flexibility of human behavior, and we're there to create that sense of empowerment. I think this is the world's most, for me, NLP has served as a very humbling, field. I feel this is a, it's a blessing to have basically done NLP and to basically, get involved in being there to help individuals out there. I think that's a very, very significant area to work on. So that's all from my side, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope we've been able to give more answers that we left out in our previous live seminar. And if there's anything else, just post your comments below, whether it's on YouTube or it's on Facebook. My team will be there. They'll be dedicatedly, answering all the questions which I might not have been able to answer. But thank you so much. See you guys soon, and adios. Have fun. Have a good day.